How y'all doing? This is my third time here, and I'm probably going to come every freaking year until this gets converted into condos. So hopefully you'll join me next year. I've got some brief introductions to do here. The first one, Phil Ferguson has been, oh, that's me, sorry. I've been involved with this for about 12 years, the secular movement. Go to lots of conferences and make donations. Keep an ear open to my show. Soon I'm going to start a matching campaign for the Secular Student Alliance. So it'll be a chance for you to donate some money and double it up. But next up we have Aron. And in case you weren't sure, it's like a nurse, RN. He is going to nurse us to a scientific and modern world and free us from religion. Aron is an atheist activist, of course, and former president of Atheist Alliance of America. And he's the host of the Raw Men podcast. And he is also the Gulf Coast Regional Director for American Atheists. He is a critic of creationism, as he should be, as we all should be, and he loves teaching science, and he is a self-declared feminist. Aron, please come on up. Give him a big hand, everybody.
Thank you much, sir. Thank you much, sir. Why'd they build this damn thing? They didn't build a boat. They wanted something realistic. They wanted people to believe that Noah really could build this ark. So they built this, right? Except that this isn't an ark, right? It's a boat, right? It's designed to look like a boat because the ark was a box. That's what the word ark means. So Noah is supposed to have loaded everything into a box that then floated, but everybody wants to put a keel on it, make it out like it's a ship, right? And why do they do this? Why do they produce this illusion? They wanted to put a whole bunch of live animals on this thing. But they realized very, very quickly that even with air conditioning systems and all the ventilation ducting that they put in here, that they couldn't put live animals on here, not and have people on there too, because especially not if you were going to load it the way the story says for Noah. Imagine 8 people with snow shovels climbing up and down that ladder for the one window that the story said they could have. They would have all died of methane poisoning on the first day. And that is why the boat is loaded with stuffed animals. They wanted to create this illusion that you could have this boat, that Noah could build this boat. So they put this thing on a concrete foundation supported by 3 buildings holding it up from the back. A nice illusion there. This thing is already suffering water damage from a year sitting in the rain, periodically. That's with the DuPont waterproofing Teflon coating that they put on this thing during the construction. I don't know if you guys have seen the construction pictures. So why do they create this illusion? They know it won't work. And when you walk through the Noah's Ark, you will see that there are steel rivets and braces throughout the whole thing. Steel rivets and braces and screws and bolts. Noah would have had that 5,000 years ago. I'm thinking he probably wouldn't be able to do that. This is technology beyond him, but they wanted to create the illusion that the ark was somehow plausible because the ark is the most ridiculous story in the entire book of fairy tales. Now think about it. There are stories in here where you have a guy resurrecting an army of the dead. To say nothing of the guy doing the Geppetto and Pinocchio thing where you sit inside a whale for 3 days trying to figure out how to make it sneeze. These are the sorts of stories we have. Does anybody believe, could anyone believe that you have Adam and Eve, right, and you have the fruit? You eat the fruit and suddenly you realize you're naked. Obviously, we're not talking about a fruit that you could cut up and make into a pie. This is a metaphor. These are not trees that you could cut down and build a canoe out of. Because remember, there's a second tree in the story that nobody talks about. It's the tree of eternal life. And when Adam eats of the fruit and God comes in to punish him, you remember God promises one thing and the snake says, no, he's not going to do that. And it turns out the snake was the only one who didn't lie in the entire story. God did exactly what the snake said he would. Everybody else lied in the story. But then God says he's got to get Adam out of the garden right away because Adam might eat of the fruit of the tree of eternal life. And if he does that, he'll be immortal. These clowns say Adam was immortal to begin with. What the hell happened, I want to ask, if he had never eaten from either tree? Would he have died a long time ago? Anyway, I was told to keep this short and sweet, and I'm going to try to do that. So who is our next speaker coming up, please? Kelly. I wasn't told who to announce. Get up here. Get Phil. Okay, Phil! Thank you, sir.
I'm stunned because Aron talked for less time than we were going to let him. So thank you for that. We're going to have Kelly up in a minute. But before we do that, I want to point out, I don't know if you guys know this, but Ken Ham lights up the Ark at night with a rainbow, right? My first thought was maybe Skittles. I mean, but no, he wants to take back the rainbow for God because the rainbow represents genocide. But instead, we're going to have a couple gentlemen come up, and they're going to talk to you for a minute about what the rainbow really does stand for. So come on up. It was so quick, I'm not sure how to introduce them, so I'll let you guys do it.
Hi, I'm Austin. This is David.
Hi.
He's a little embarrassed. But my sign, they have shirts, they have like other products too that they say take back the rainbow. And so my sign says, if you want to take back the rainbow, pull it out of my ass. So, thank you.
One of the other funny things, and Aron pointed out the second tree, and thank you for doing that. I am also someone that talks about that. The other thing that I find interesting about the first tree, and remember, this is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? Eve ate the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So after she ate it, she had the knowledge. She then decided it was a good thing to give Adam the fruit. She was framed, and women are suffering for it even now, and this shit needs to end. And someone who is very sensitive to this is Kelly A. Helton. She's 13. You're 13? 14? Okay. Whew, that makes it all different. 14. 1 year matters. When you're 14, that's awesome. She's an equal rights activist from Kentucky, of course, right here, local native. She's passionate about science, equality, church-state separation. She's spoken at countless rallies and conferences, including International Women's Day, Planned Parenthood, and the March for Science in Cincinnati. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kelly Helton.
My name's Kelly Helton, and I'm the equal rights advocate for the Tri-State Freethinkers. The Ark Encounter has become a symbol of what is wrong with Kentucky. And let me tell you what is wrong with Kentucky. My transgender classmates can't be in peace. Girls are being shamed in their own sex ed classes. Religion is being brought into our public schools by our own government officials. Students are being lied to about basic scientific facts, all in the name of religion. I've had teachers tell me that the Big Bang Theory and evolution are just theories and you can believe whatever you want. I've had teachers tell me that our Constitution was founded on Moses and the 10 Commandments. I've had teachers who shame students for not standing up for the Pledge of Allegiance. I've had teachers who made my choir class sing religious gospel songs in front of the school. This is a clear violation of the separation of religion and government. The Ark Encounter is a clear violation of the separation of religion and government. We need to do something about this. We can no longer sit back and allow the Christian right to hijack our schools and our community. We must show up to school board and city council meetings. We must show up to protests and rallies. We must show up when our allies are facing discrimination. And we must show up and unite under the banner of equality to make change. Because when equality is under attack, atheists show up. Now, this quote was originally said last year at the Ark protest by a great role model of mine and an incredible activist, Blauvelt-Copelin from Planned Parenthood. Now, when I say equality is under attack, you say atheists show up. When equality is under attack, 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 atheists show up. Thank you so much.
All right, next up we're going to have Lauren Blauvelt-Copelin. And before we get into her, it's also a hobby of mine to go protest Planned Parenthood protesters. So I can tell you those stories sometime if you ask about them. I don't want to do it now and take too much of her time away. And I've got my little bracelet on here. You can get it from Planned Parenthood, get for more information over there at their booth. She is the State Field Campaign Director for Planned Parenthood and is a very active activist. I guess that's good English. Please welcome Lauren to the stage. Come on up.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. Kelly, honestly, when the Supreme Court, when Justice Anthony Kennedy decided to step down and we were thinking about how bleak our future could be, you know, I thought of Kelly and I thought of all the young people who are speaking up, and I was like, we still got this. We're going to be okay. And I have other reasons to think we're going to be okay too, as you know, because all of you are here. And I want you to know that 1 in 5 Americans have participated in a rally or protest since 2016. That's huge. That's more demonstrations than our country has ever participated in one time. And we're doing it because we're showing up for women's rights. We're showing up for LGBTQ equality. We're showing up for people of color, and we're showing up for immigrants. We're showing up because our rights are under attack. We see them slipping away. And we know that there are rights that our community members haven't even achieved yet in this country. We have reason to move forward, and we're being dragged backwards by the same people who were able to pull together the resources and the power to put up this ark. So as I really appreciate how much the Tri-State Freethinkers have been pushing equality and fighting for reproductive rights and LGBTQ equality, especially in our area. I want to say, as a reproductive rights activist, it's really important that we all show up for atheist rights and that we show up for atheist issues, because the same, when religious power comes into our public resources, it is women and people of color and people who identify as different genders that are going to be most attacked. It's our rights that disappear first. So it's really important that we come together and protect our public resources and protect our public dollars. A good example of how that's happening nationally now that Planned Parenthood is fighting is Title X. Title X is our national reproductive funding source. And it is the reason why we have the lowest unintended pregnancy rate and why we have seen abortion rates going down, because of access to birth control, because of access to sex education. So what does the Trump administration want to do? They want to take that money from real healthcare providers and send them to crisis pregnancy centers. These are organizations run by religious groups that specifically only talk about abstinence, and they talk about church. You know, they say if you get pregnant, you have to be pregnant. They think pregnancy is a punishment for not being married, and if you're married, you should only be reproducing. They don't care about our right to make up our own families. So Title X is our it's what has moved us forward, and it's going to be gone. I mean, we have a petition in the back. I'll be the first to say it's our effort to delay. So if you haven't gone, Maya's here in the front, but if you can go back and sign our petition to help us protect Title X, help us reject a domestic gag rule that says doctors can't talk about abortion, can't refer a patient to get an abortion, which means if you find yourself pregnant, you don't have the option to even, you don't even know if your doctor is going to be telling you the truth or is even going to be allowed to tell you everything. So this is exactly what happens when religion comes into government, when religion comes into healthcare. So it's so important that we continue to show up for each other. I want to tell you, the folks that put up the Ark and the folks who, Trump and all of his cronies, like Attorney General Mike DeWine in Ohio, they weren't given their power. God didn't come down and anoint them, obviously. They collectively built power by organizing people and organizing money. This has been a long time coming, and we have the exact same ability to do that. We have to organize our communities, we have to organize our time and our resources, and I just hope that you continue to join me in this fight and continue to show up. It's never been more important than it is right now. Thanks so much for your time.
just got me to thinking about, you know, some things are going wrong in politics today, at least in my opinion. I had a friend on my Facebook wall ask me why I'm so upset about everything because no one's taken my rights away. Just let that soak in, that someone actually told me that I shouldn't be upset because my rights aren't being taken away. Why is it wrong to care about other people? I don't understand that. Next up, we have Monica Burns, and she is the founder of and co-organizer of Black Nonbelievers of Louisville and a member of the Louisville Atheists and Freethinkers. She's a native of Georgia, and she's lived in Louisville, Kentucky for 21 years. Am I supposed to say Louisville? I got to have something, marbles or Louisville? I'll upset everybody that way. It's equal. Monica became an affiliate chapter of her organization in 2015 and providing an accepting community for Black people and others who are leaving or have left religion. Please welcome Monica Burns.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to briefly rant at you today about the biblical worldview and how it aids in discrimination and how we're seeing it play out today in our world. We've got courts deciding that businesses have the right to discriminate against people based on their sexuality because of their biblical worldview. We have the White House press secretary telling everyone that it's biblical to separate immigrant children from their parents because it's just biblical to follow the law. We have Walgreens pharmacists deciding not to do their jobs based on their judgment call on a person's prescription prescribed by their doctor for them. And we've also got Ken Ham and Kentucky lawmakers giving him millions and millions of dollars in tax incentives in order to promote this discriminatory world view. And I don't know if you all know this or not, but Ken Ham has actually built, aside from this, he's built a school. Answers in Genesis teamed up with Renew a Nation. It's an organization dedicated to teaching children a biblical world view. They opened a school in the fall of 2017. They're teaching grades K through 7th. They have an 8th grade class this upcoming 2018-2019 school year, and it's opened in Florence, Kentucky. The name is 12 Stones Christian Academy, and of course they'll negate all forms of science, multiple branches of large swaths of multiple branches of science will be negated in order to uphold the Christian myth, the creation myth, the curse of mankind by the God character, the subsequent redeeming of mankind, the lifting of the curse by human blood sacrifice of the Jesus character, who happens to be the God character in disguise. So that's what they're going to be teaching kids. They'll negate all of what science has found, all evidence that upholds the age of the earth, all evidence that links us to a common ancestor will be completely negated in their teaching of literature, history, and science. And children are needed. We need children to understand what we know. They need to know the evidence that we found. They need to understand where we're going, what we have, and they need to learn to actually have a thirst for knowledge and inquiry and not be told that all must back into misanthropic tales that serve to only discriminate and call it biblical. You know, and make no mistakes, let's make no mistakes about it. Bloodborne curses, incest, worldwide floods that kill humanity, these tales are immoral. The entire book is immoral. They've been holding this idea that they're the moral group. It's the first thing that creationists will come and say, where do you get your morals from? The entire book is absolutely immoral. It's the only reason that women have been relegated, women and girls relegated to property status in its pages and are still fighting for equality today. It took a human worldview to determine that slavery in all cultures was wrong. It took a human worldview to determine that rape was wrong, stoning gay people was wrong, stoning children, beating children for disobedience is wrong, stoning people for having sex without the necessary paperwork, consensual sex without the necessary paperwork filed with the state is actually wrong. And even today we have women's rights, women's reproductive rights, LGBTQ equality, embryonic stem cell research, all are still at risk today because of a biblical world view. You cannot teach people to love humankind while also simultaneously teaching them to believe in and have fear of one of the deities we created that actually despises human nature. You know, we can't actually teach people that. We've had some really great ideas as humans, and we've had some really bad ideas, some very, very bad ideas. Our best ideas have been born out of human reason and altruistic morality, real morality. Our worst ideas have been rooted in fear and tribalism. Let's move forward. Let's teach our kids what we know and what we have evidence for. Let's actually attempt to try to find cures for cancer and MS and Alzheimer's by perhaps funding embryonic stem cell research instead of pretending that they are babies or possible potential babies in some way. Let's actually teach them what they need to know to build our society forward. Let's not continue to hold on to and allow our lawmakers are funding myths, things that uphold discrimination. This is a complete and total regression into the darkest fantasies of humanity. Instead, let's teach our people human reason and altruistic morality so we can move forward. And the last thing I'm going to say, because I know I'm past my time, is that we're voting November 6th. Please get out and vote. It's time out for voter apathy, completely time out for it. Find out who's running if you don't already know, and find out their stance. Find out their stance on Black lives, find out their stance on women's reproductive rights, find out their stance on LGBTQ equality. If they haven't made their stance known, call them and let them know that you want to know what that stance is. We have to make our voices heard in order to stop electing people that throw our money towards shit like this. So, that it? Thank you.
All right, we've got one more speaker coming up in a minute. Just wanted to remind you that while it's wonderful to see so many people here, this stuff takes money. There's some places you can donate money. You can donate to different organizations. I personally, my business, we tithe. My business tithes. 10% of its gross revenue goes to organizations like this. And I mentioned a few weeks from now I'm going to launch a campaign for $10,000 I'm going to match for Secular Student Alliance. Earlier in the year we did a big fundraiser for American Atheists. If you don't know where the groups are in your area or you're from out of town, please go over to the American Atheist tent and talk to Jim. He can help you find or connect with a group in your area. So hopefully you can do that. If there's not a group in your area, maybe you can start one. So your time is valuable, your money is valuable, so consider donating. I'm not going to ask you to give 10%, but I think if you could give 5%, I think we can do twice as much with half as much because we are using science and reason and reality, and we're not building stained glass castles for the men that sit inside of them. So enough of that. I'm sorry. I get on my little high horse. Next we have up Seth Andrews, and I got some pretty words to read about him, but I decided fuck it. Seth's a friend of mine. He is not the thinking atheist. I want to make sure that everybody was clear with that. He hosts a platform and a webcast and a podcast called that. He doesn't think at all. He does have 2 books because he needs money. Deconverted and Sacred Cows. Go buy them. They're awesome books. And when you look at them, you can't quite figure out how the books are so good. Please welcome Seth Andrews.
How does one follow that kind of introduction? And the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil at the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. That's Genesis chapter 6, my friends. How could a God who already knew everything, past, present, and future, have regret? How could someone who already knew the outcome of every event, past, present, and future, in fact be surprised? The good book does not say. But yea, oh yea, the Lord was filled with regret and trouble, and apparently he was more than a bit pissed. Astounded that imperfectly created humans would act imperfectly, God watched from beyond the earth, beyond our atmosphere, beyond the waters which apparently existed and floated in space before creation, the waters in the deep. He came to the conclusion that again he apparently should have already concluded it. Oh, it's very confusing. Justice demanded it, my friends. Justice needed genocide. Not just the execution of those committing the evil and heinous acts, but of the infirmed, the elderly, sitting quietly, peacefully in their homes, children who hadn't yet reached a point in their lives where they could understand concepts like evil. The unborn, which, by the way, made Yahweh the very first abortion doctor. Animals, too, they gotta go, except for a few specimens from each animal kind, and that's for you, Kinham, animal kinds. And they would essentially do what the humpback whales did in Star Trek IV. They would spring into the future to repopulate the species. Any Trek fans? Okay. And God thought to himself, I won't simply annihilate everybody except Noah and his family. Too easy. I'm going to concoct an elaborate Rube Goldberg mechanism. So he instructed the one righteous guy, Noah, at the age of 500, to build the boat of size of a small stadium using only trees and tar. He didn't need 100 million in 21st century construction equipment to do it. Despite the reality that the townspeople would soon be horribly killed, he didn't even need taxpayer support. Noah was indeed righteous. And the animals came, my friends, camels and donkeys and hamsters and anacondas and giant pandas and parakeets and velociraptors. They all came. They were all happy, peaceful travelers who walked from their respective homes to board the Ark. It did take longer for the penguins and the polar bears, but it gave them time as well on the journey to adapt to the 130-degree Middle Eastern desert climate. The boat was built to God-specific specifications, this many cubits, that many cubits, use this wood, use these construction methods. And when it was completed, Noah and his family boarded the Ark, and he sealed the door as the rains began to fall. They would be the only humans saved, for apparently, suspiciously, nobody else on planet Earth had a boat. For 150 days, waters flooded the earth, which made for some logistical challenges. For sure, weren't many of these animals carnivorous after the fall of Adam and Eve in the garden? Wouldn't the cheetah get tired of his vegan diet and look over at the gazelle and lick his chops? What about the specific diets required by specific creatures? Bamboo for the panda, fresh greens for the herbivores, meat for the carnivores. How did the animals deal with muscle atrophy after so many months in confinement? Did they ever get cramps? I can't even imagine the smell, all these beasts essentially existing in the world's largest locker room. And allowing they had plenty of food, how did 8 people shovel thousands of tons of animal waste out of a stadium-sized boat with only one window? How did they do it? Outside the window, how was ocean life surviving? The fresh rainwaters mixing with the salt ocean water to make a brackish mixture toxic to both the fresh and the ocean water animals. Did the sharks and the trout and the pufferfish and the marlins just hold their watery breath for over a year? Why would God have Noah send out doves to find land? When God and Noah had been on speaking terms only a few verses before. Remember, God was telling him exact cubits and construction methods. And now he has Noah sending a dove out to do recon to find land. And since the Ark has no motor, no sail, and no rudder, it would have made absolutely no difference. They could have been 30 feet from land, and they would have simply helplessly drifted right on by. When the boat finally did dock, what did everybody eat? The animals and plants had already been killed in the flood, destroyed. I didn't see anything in Genesis about Noah and manna. No, these details are not important, my friends. What is important is that Noah and his family then repopulated the earth, over 5,000 ethnic groups in about 4,000 years, and then Noah, the one righteous man worth saving, spent the latter part of his life naked and drunk. And his story would be documented in an anonymously written book, and in modern times would be memorialized by Kinham, who somehow sold the state of Kentucky on the construction of a $100 million paperweight. It would be a monument, my friends, to both the church and the state. That rolling sound you hear being our founding fathers and the authors of the Constitution rolling in their graves. Lord Bevin would smile approvingly from his mansion chamber. And Yahweh, still surprised that his genocidal flood didn't really solve the problem of human imperfection, that ended up totally sucking for Jesus, who as God would then have to impregnate a teenager with himself for yet another biblical death. I am here today, my friends, because I was indoctrinated with the actual verses of this story. I was taught, warned, I was told every freaking day that I was born broken and I needed to be fixed. I was trained to distrust science and scientists. I protected my own religious belief while working to deny the beliefs and opinions of others. Like Ken Ham's Ark Encounter, I was a monument to bad information, bad thinking, bad ideas. And now that I am free of all that nonsense, I am here because I think Kentucky, I think my country, and humanity deserve so much more, so much better than the awful fairy tale of global genocide. And the claim that you and I deserved it, and the misuse of taxpayer money to sell lies to children. Ken Ham, the evidence is in. It is overwhelming. You built a monument to an event that never happened, promoting a religion long debunked, selling a lie that more and more people every minute of every day are rejecting. We are here, you and I are here today to remind people that it is nonsense, that nobody needs an ark, and that the real world story of humanism and humanity remains the one worth telling. Thank you all so very much.
All right, next up we have Debbie Allen. She is the Deputy Director of the Secular Coalition for America. She became involved in free thought movement in 2007. And she's warned me that she's got an incredibly awesome talk, and I shouldn't say too much about her, so I'm just going to introduce her. Ladies and gentlemen, Debbie Allen.
Thank you so much. Give me a kiss. Okay. Hello, everybody. I think today's been really inspirational to me. You are my tribe in a way that nobody else is, because the reason I got involved at the local level was Mount Soledad Cross up on the hill above La Jolla in San Diego, things like that. I just couldn't be who I really was without people like you around me. So that's a little aside. I'm going to read you some remarks, but just want to you to know how much it means to me that you came out today and that we did this together. It's really important. I've spent over a decade working as a volunteer in a community, organizing events such as this, and nothing that I have ever done with that regard or will ever do makes any sense without people like you with me and us supporting one another. Please never stop marching or protesting, and never, ever stop criticizing and critiquing or complaining or raising your voice when there is injustice and ignorance. As atheists, humanists, agnostics, freethinkers, skeptics, as secular Americans, we must add our voice to every conversation about the things that matter. At the Secular Coalition for America, we spend a lot of time talking to members of Congress and their staff about the 1 in 4 Americans who are non-religious. We show them charts and fact sheets about America's changing religious landscape and explain to them how the non-religious outnumber evangelicals. And while those charts are impressive, nothing is as powerful as witnessing our community in action. What you have done today is a true service and inspiration to me and to all those who wish that they were here with you today. You give us all courage and strength and the incentive we need to keep fighting the good fight. The secular movement depends on secular Americans, and the staff at the Secular Coalition, the movement's primary lobbying organization, consider ourselves to be working for you. We take seriously our responsibility to represent all of you on Capitol Hill. So just as many employees would give progress reports to their employers, I want to give you a brief progress report on our work in Washington, D.C. I want to start by addressing the big orange-faced elephant in the room, or rather in the Oval Office. The challenges we're facing from the Trump administration, their allies in the 115th Congress, and the religious right are truly unprecedented. The theocrats of this country were emboldened and empowered by the 2016 election. And since then, they have done everything they can to erase decades of hard-won progress. Unfortunately, it's not an understatement to say that if you're a woman, LGBTQ, a non-theist, or a member of a religious minority, you have fewer rights today than you did in 2016. We could spend days going through the Trump administration's attacks on our secular government, but frankly, that would be depressing and I'm just not in the mood. However, in order to give you a sense of the stakes, I think it's important to highlight a few key actions this administration has taken. In October of 2017, Attorney General Jeff Sessions issued his mistitled Memorandum on Religious Liberty. In this 25-page memo, Attorney General Sessions instructed federal agencies that to the fullest extent possible, they are to carry out the religious rights agenda. This executive decree included instructing the IRS to turn a blind eye to churches that break the law by endorsing and supporting political candidates, adopting an indefensibly broad interpretation of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which they will now interpret seriously as saying the government may not second-guess, quote, the reasonableness of a religious belief, unquote. This means that any belief, no matter how crazy, could be used as a get-out-of-jail-free card that cannot be questioned. And it even says religious institutions have a right to taxpayer money in the form of vouchers for private religious schools and federal money for churches damaged by natural disasters. Not to be outdone by the executive branch, in March of 2018, the Senate reintroduced the deceptively titled First Amendment Defense Act, known as FADA. FADA would allow the government to do business with federal contractors who discriminate against same-sex couples, unmarried couples, and even single mothers. Let me be clear, FADA does not defend the First Amendment. It promotes religious privilege by exempting one set of beliefs from federal non-discrimination laws. Then in early May, on the occasion of the National Day of Prayer, the president issued an executive order establishing the White House Faith and Opportunity Initiative. According to the White House, the purpose of this office is to provide policy recommendations to help protect religious freedom according to the guidelines issued in October by the Department of Justice. While we don't know who the president will appoint to lead this office, we can be sure that individual will work to pour even more taxpayer money into religious groups that are free to discriminate, have little accountability, and zero transparency. At the end of May, President Trump reinstated the domestic gag rule. This draconian policy will strip federal funding from any group that provides access to or even information about abortion care. Effectively, this ghoulish policy forces healthcare providers to choose between giving their patients accurate information about their health care or the very resources they need to properly treat those same patients. This is only a sample of what we're up against in Washington. I want to assure you that every single time this administration attacked our secular government, the Secular Coalition for America, and our partner organizations were there to sound the alarm, issue a response, and to push back against them. One of my favorite examples is our response to Attorney General Jeff Sessions' Religious Liberty Memorandum. In less than 72 hours after the memorandum was released, we worked with our partners in D.C. to draft a letter to Congress signed by all of the Secular Coalition's member organizations, many of whom are here today. We issued a statement to media outlets, and we issued our analysis of the memo to members of Congress and their staffs. Only days later, few days, when Attorney General Sessions was brought before the Senate Judiciary Committee, we heard a member of Congress quote our analysis word for word while questioning Sessions. We do have a way of making inroads in this process. You are there. making inroads against the religious right. Our persistent resistance to the Trump administration's theocratic policies has helped us build new relationships with members of Congress who know they can count on us, the secular community, to stand with them on the front lines of the fight to protect the First Amendment. And in this ongoing fight to keep religion and government separate, I am proud to say we have new allies in Congress. In April, at our annual Secular Awards dinner, Representative Jared Huffman announced the formation of the first ever Congressional Free Thought Caucus. So far, this caucus consists of Representative Huffman, along with Representatives Jamie Raskin and Jerry McNerney. Now, there are others, and I'm not allowed to say their names because it's unfortunate for politicians to be counted among us. You know that, they know that, but we do have some brave people that are stepping forward, so please support them. The mission of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus is fourfold, and listen carefully because I know you'll be impressed. First, to promote public policy on the basis of reason, science, and moral values. Second, to protect the secular character of our government by adhering to the strict constitutional principle of the separation of church and state. Third, to oppose discrimination against atheists, agnostics, humanists, and the non-religious, and to champion the value of freedom of thought and conscience worldwide. And fourth, to provide a forum for members of Congress to discuss their moral frameworks, ethical values, and personal religious journeys. It's difficult to overstate what a milestone this is for the secular movement. By proudly and unapologetically standing up for the non-religious, these members of Congress have struck a powerful blow against the de facto religious test that keeps so many secular Americans from running for office. And while this should make us all hopeful for the future, it speaks to the power of the secular movement, the power that we have right now. Make no mistake, the Congressional Free Thought Caucus was established with the help of the secular community, us. And the forward-thinking lawmakers who have joined it have done so with the expectation that secular Americans will be growing an engaged share of the electorate. Which brings me to the midterm elections. If ever there was a time for the secular community to show what we can do, this is it. Because we cannot afford to allow 2 more years of fighting the three branches of government. And yes, the 2020 election will be important, but mobilizing the secular community this November will provide the secular Americans our voting bloc that our allies can depend on for support and our opponents can count on to vote them out of office. In preparation for the midterm elections, we're launching an ambitious campaign to engage grassroots secular communities just like this one across the country. This partnership will help local secular groups work together and supply them with the resources they need to be a force for change. So be sure you're doing your registration drives and getting people to the polls. Organizations like the Secular Coalition can provide you with the resources and the political expertise you need. But what we need from you mostly is your enthusiasm, your dedication, and getting out the vote. Pundits talk about the evangelical voting bloc and how it shapes election. The reason they talk about evangelical voters is because despite our demographic edge, evangelicals still beat us 2-1 at the polls on election day. I need to repeat this. Evangelicals still beat us 2-1 at the polls on election day. I want 2018 to be the year that I hear a pundit on television say, the election was decided by secular voters. I don't know if 2018 will be that year, but I do know the time is coming. The numbers don't lie. The non-religious now account for 1 out of every 4 Americans and comprise 4 out of every 10 millennials. I know that sooner or later the non-religious will change the course of American political history. The only thing standing in our way is us. There are disagreements within the secular community, and I'll just kind of flip over some of them. You know what they are. Whatever our disagreements about priorities, policies, or strategies. I'm here to tell you that if we allow these differences to divide us, none of these issues will matter at all, because the religious right will continue to cling to power. And the one thing you can say for sure about the religious right, when they get power, they always use it. I don't claim to have the answers to questions challenging or dividing our movement, but I do know that is the secular community doesn't come together to take our country back, the religious right will move it so far towards a theocracy you won't be able to recognize it. 16 years ago, the Secular Coalition for America was founded to give non-theistic community a unified voice on Capitol Hill. In the early years of the Bush administration, when the religious right was ascendant, the first leaders of fledgling secular movement chose to put aside 5% of the things they disagreed about and work together on the 95% of the things they did agree about. And today, by every metric, the secular movement is stronger than it's ever been. And while it's a cliche, it's true that with great power comes great responsibility. The issues that challenge and sometimes divide our movement are important, but we can't focus on any of those issues if we're too busy defending, or worse yet, rebuilding the wall of separation between church and state. We also don't want to be defined by what we're against. Our movement and our advocacy can be unified and organized around a set of values that transcend the politics of any day. This past February, we made a major step toward unity at our member organization meeting. At this meeting, all 19 of our national members agreed to following 4 secular values: freedom, inclusion, equality, and knowledge. These values are what we can rally behind. And while our definitions of these words may slightly differ and are very focused, these are values all secular Americans of all political persuasions can believe in. The only way to effectively counter the religious rights crusade is with our own vision of a secular government. When they push democracy, we need to defend freedom. When they preach division, we need to offer inclusion. When they preach division, when they advocate for privilege, we need to stand for equality. And when they try to spread their ignorance, we need to empower Americans with knowledge. Freedom, inclusion, equality, knowledge, that's why we're here and that's what we're fighting for. We are facing unprecedented challenges, but the unordinary times we live in have given the secular community an opportunity to be extraordinary. We need to unite in defense of the America that recognizes the freedom of and the freedom from religion. Because this country has never been a theocracy. And as long as we stand together, it never will. Thank you.
We got a few more speakers I'd like to come up, and I want to tell you a quick story. Well, the Genocide and Incest Park billboard was my brainchild. Really, the protest comes to our next speaker. She kept telling me we should do this protest, and I told her it was not possible. And the famous quote from this person is, "We got this." And that gets us in all sorts of trouble every time. Well, logistically, this is a nightmare to pull off without parking, public grounds, trying to figure this out. Love the mask. You know, I didn't think we could pull this off of something this big at the time. And so I was at the Reason Rally celebrity dinner, and like all things, when I get on stage, I promise things. And I got on stage and we're like, we're doing this protest, we're doing this billboard. And I got off stage and called Jen, like, by the way, I agreed to do this protest in front of hundreds of people, and we need to make it happen, and I'm going out of town. So Jen Scott is the protest queen. She is the treasurer for the Tri-State Freethinkers, treasurer for the American Atheists. She's the regional director for American Atheists, and is a title whore, to be honest. Please welcome Jen Scott to the stage.
Are y'all having a good time? Well, I was going to list all my titles, but Jim already did that, so. Thank you all for coming out. I want to give a big round of applause to all of our volunteers. We couldn't do this without you. I also want to acknowledge the board of the Tri-State Freethinkers. If you are on our board, please raise your hand. If you are on the board of a nonprofit, please raise your hand. If you are a leader or an organizer for a group, please raise your hand. We cannot do what we do without you. In November, I have the right to vote. Decades ago, people protested and fought for women to have the right to vote. Without them, I would not be here. Decades from now, people are going to look back at this time and say, oh crap, we're facing something, but they made it through that. We can make it through this. You guys are going to be inspiration for now and for the future. And thank you for doing what you do. How many people are going to go back and start a group where they're from? Excellent. Go to the American Atheist booth, leave your name, tell us what you want to do, and we will help you do it. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Mandisa Thomas is the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers. She has served on many boards as well. She's a little smarter than me and seems to do it not at the same time. She's been on the board for Foundation Beyond Belief and Secular Coalition for America and currently serves with me on the American Atheists board. Please welcome Mandisa.
Thank you very much, Jen, and thank you all for being here today. How many of you have the most recent edition or issue of Playboy magazine? Okay. So there's an article about atheists, and I highly recommend, in addition to looking at the photos, because there's nothing wrong with that, I encourage you to read the article, particularly one entry in particular, where the author wrote, "The most encouraging moment of the weekend comes when I introduce myself to Mandisa Thomas, president and founder of Black Nonbelievers, an organization dedicated to support and visibility for Black atheists." But I need to make one thing clear. Black Nonbelievers isn't just about me. You heard from Monica Burns, who was our Louisville organizer earlier today. We now have a Cincinnati chapter, and our organizers are here today. We are proof positive that people of color and Black folks are leaving religion and the God concept behind and are joining in the fight for everything pertaining to what we as atheists go through. Who represents this change is important. And this is something that the community needs to understand. I'm going to talk for a few moments about support and consistency and the value of keeping it moving and keep going. This here today, this event, this wonderful event, while we enjoy it in the moment, it does take a lot of time and effort and a lot of labor and sweat to put these things together. And so once again, I take my hat off to the organizers, being an organizer myself, because without the organizers, this just does not get done. And we must remember that in addition to challenging the awful things that Ark Encounter represents, we are still building that community amongst us. And we must be prepared to help those who are coming into their non-belief and their atheism, and they need to know that we are here for them. We are here for each other. We are changing lives, and that is a part of the Black Nonbelievers campaign. We have changed lives, and we are all changing lives right now standing here today. So when we leave here, if you are a part of a group, please continue to support that group. Continue to support the other organizations. Support Black Nonbelievers. Support the Tri-State Freethinkers. Support the Secular Coalition for America. Support American Atheists. All of our organizations we are nothing without you. And we must understand that if a problem affects one, more than likely it is affecting all of us. So yes, the visibility of people of color in this movement affects all of us. And we all have a responsibility to make sure that that is happening first and foremost. There is much diversity in this movement. we are living proof. We are all living proof. It isn't just about how we look, it is also what we do. So just keep that in mind today once we leave here, that you have made a difference today, and we will continue to make a difference in the future, and we will continue to fight. And being more visible, getting more people involved will only make us stronger. And again, just keep up the fight and keep going. Thank you.
And next year is going to be an amazing year for free thought in this area. As Jim mentioned, the American Atheist National Convention will be here Easter weekend in Cincinnati. It's going to be 4 days of awesomeness. There may be something similar to this as part of the planning. We will be doing the Ark Encounter protest again next year. It's going to be on a Sunday, the Lord's Day. It's perfect. So plan for that. And then in September, on September 21st, we are going to be in Lexington with the Kentucky Free Thought Convention. And I need to introduce the next speaker, but he really needs no introduction. I'm just going to say that some of the best atheist activists have really long hair.
It might be. The reason that I was invited to come up here was that I did a video series disproving the Noah's flood. It started with like how meteorology disproves the flood, how geology disproves the flood, how paleontology disproves the flood, how dendrochronology and archaeology and anthropology and even mythology disproves the flood. And on one of those, a week or so ago, somebody commented on one of those videos saying, "Doesn't this idiot know that the remains of Noah's Ark have been found?" And so I responded to that with a link that I knew he would respect. It was a link from Answers in Genesis, showing that no, the Ark had not been found. That lie was exposed as a hoax decades ago. Where were you, and why do you think I'm the idiot here? Now, what I did know was that there was this wannabe archaeologist, a kind of a pretender, named Ron Wyatt, who in the late 70s was looking for Noah's Ark. Where was he looking? He was looking at aerial photographs of the mountains of Ararat, the two peaks they have there. So he's already looking for the Ark. He's already heavy into confirmation bias. So of course he's going to seize on anything that looks vaguely boat-shaped from his idea. And so he identifies something that he says is the Ark. Not might be, not could be, is the Ark. And so he demands that that's what it is. Now what he actually saw was something called the Drupanar site, which is a mound of dirt, literally, that is in the shape of a canoe because it's caused by a mud flow. But this guy doesn't accept that. He actually went to Turkey, went to the site himself to see it with his own eyes, and still insists that the Ark is real, that he's found the ribs of the ship. And he's produced a number of other artifacts that all look like dirt and rocks to the rest of us. But he says that they are rusted rivets or petrified wood that are found in the area, all of that. None of it remotely true. He even convinced a number of the leading creationists from other organizations like not Answers in Genesis, but the Institute for Creation Research. A couple of their bigwigs got them to go out to Turkey, to go up to the site, to see it with their own eyes. However, these other creationists only saw dirt and left the area parting company with Ron Wyatt so that they would not be associated with him. Ron Wyatt was never a credible person, and his reputation just continued to get worse the more stellar his career became, as he discovered the real location of Mount Sinai, the exact location of the crossing of the Red Sea, and a number of other artifacts I'm going to bring to you now. On the hill of Golgotha, of course, he found where Jesus was crucified, and then he's investigating a cave down below that, where he finds that there's a crack in the ceiling, where there's this trail of some kind of dried up substance. Now, it was a liquid, ran in, but it's now dried. And now, where does it rest? It's on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. He found the Ark of the Covenant hidden directly beneath where Jesus was crucified. Not looks like the Ark of the Covenant, is the Ark of the Covenant. And so that meant that the trail of what he decided was blood must be that of Jesus. So he took a piece of a pop top from a can and used that little teeny edge to scrape up the most valuable blood sample ever in history with the pop top of a soda can. And he took that to some Jewish scientists who were not named, to analyze the blood. And they followed his specific instructions to take that blood and moisturize it in a saline solution at body temperature and stir it slowly for 3 days. What team of scientists wouldn't listen to instructions like that? You can imagine any scientist would do exactly that, right? 3 whole days of stirring slowly dead blood until they reveal, speaking back to each other in Hebrew and getting all excited, that this blood is alive. The blood was reanimated. It's zombie blood. Then they did a genetic analysis of this blood and discovered that it had only, it had 23 chromosomes. It had Mary's chromosomes, the Virgin Mary, of course, plus a sex chromosome that appeared miraculously out of nothing to make Jesus male. Now, some of us might want to see those studies. Some of us might want to know what laboratory did that study. But of course, nobody can trace any of this. And Ron Wyatt allegedly kept some of this blood from his pop top so that when other people come to visit his house with a microscope, he could like whip out Jesus's actual blood that he didn't surrender to anybody else. He has a lot of artifacts, including the bones of giants and other such things, that he says have been tested, so you don't need to test it again. We certainly don't need to test it in any way that can be documented. So, after Answers in Genesis wrote an article declaring Ron Wyatt a fraud. And I have to give him credit for that. I mean, how often do creationists point out the frauds in other creationists? There's a handful of them. Kent Hovind is one that was called out as a fraud. Dr. Carl Baugh is another one. There's 2 people that just pretend to be doctors. But why wouldn't Answers in Genesis call out Ron Wyatt as a fraud when Institute for Creation Research and 2 other creationist organizations had already done that? Answers in Genesis can't be backing up somebody who's been proven false. So Answers in Genesis has called out a couple of other frauds, like Dr. Javier Cabrera, who's the dentist in Peru who paid these natives to carve out these artifact stones that were artificially aged to become, where he could sell them as pre-Columbian artifacts showing people riding around on dinosaurs. Answers in Genesis called them out too. But again, they did that after his fraud was already revealed on national television. So they only call out the frauds when the frauds are proven, because they want to maintain a make-believe situation. Ken Ham has already said that if you want to believe in salvation, which is the back half of the Bible, then you got to believe in creation, which is the front half of the Bible, which means you have to believe with all your might. He's talking about make-believe. He's not talking about anything that is factually accurate. He said in an argument or a debate with Hugh Ross, he said he's seen the evidence of an old earth. He simply rejects it. And in a matter that he describes as God glasses, we would use the word confirmation bias, where Ken Ham says you can ignore all the evidence. He doesn't phrase it this way. He says you can just ignore all the evidence in favor of the folklore. You believe the Bible and then ignore everything else that gets in the way. That's what he wants you to do. And he thinks that's justified, and he thinks that's honest. And Answers in Genesis, you can look it up on their website. They have a statement in their statement of faith where they say that no evidence of any kind on history, geology, or anything else can be valid if it contradicts their interpretation of the Bible. So all they want to do, and the reason that they built this damn thing, Noah's Ark replica, is because they want to convince the next generation of people who are going to give Ken Ham another $100 million for his next project, which I understand now is supposed to be the Tower of fucking Babel. I've been on the observation deck of the Burj Khalifa. God didn't seem to be pissed about that. So if they built this ark to the scale the Bible describes, now they're going to have to build a tower. Is it taller than the Burj Khalifa? How tall does a tower have to be before it begins to intimidate God, before God freaks out, oh my God, they're going to get to the cloud I live on? And I don't have a way to follow this up other than to say that everything that this organization does, Answers in Genesis, is the leading producer of propaganda for pseudoscience, opposing science, and disrupting education because they want to mislead and deceive innocent children, and they want to take the pensions from little old ladies who are easily convinced or connived or what have you. This is entirely dishonest. Other people will say that Ken Ham actually believes what he says. I don't believe that he believes in the same context that we do. What I believe, if I believe something, if I say that I believe something, it means that I don't know it to be true, but I think it's true. Or I think it's closest to the truth or most likely probable, something like that. But when a believer says they believe, it means they're convincing themselves. Many, many times I've had people tell me, these may be what the facts are, but I prefer to believe this. Nothing's ever going to change my mind. And after I prove a point wrong in their belief system, they say, well, why can't I believe what I want to believe? Why would you want to believe something after you know it's wrong? And especially when they tell me that it may be wrong, but I don't want to be right. I've actually heard admissions like this. I'm in the position that I'm in, or that I do what I do, because I value truth. I mean, the only practical information has, or only accurate information has practical application. The only way you can improve your understanding is to seek out the flaws in your current perspective and correct them. You can't do that with faith if you're going to assume your conclusion and then close your mind to everything else. And then all the projection where they say that we're the ones with the closed mind. And then all the distortions while pretending that they have evidence. What is their evidence? I have a magic book of fables. I have this book. And that's all they've got. I'm not going to spend much more time up here. The next speaker should be coming up momentarily. I want to thank you guys for coming out. I want to thank you for having a great movement and making these people notice us again and getting all those dirty looks from all the people in the passing SUVs. All right. And I'm out. Jen?
Yes, I understand that my whole life is just a blink of an eye. The history of the earth is with each moment that goes by. But this moment that I'm with you, it feels like time has stood still. It feels somehow like it matters, and that it always will. Thank you so much.